All right, we are live. So we are down at Cancun at the Westin interviewing James Knez. My name is Michael Knez. I'm his oldest son, and you are
Jonathan Knez, his second oldest
son.
son.
Yeah. So as far as children go, we are the only two. Um, oh, fantastic.
I wonder what that means.
This is the GoPro freaking out. Anyway, we'll figure that out. Anyway, this is a life interview with James Knez, so why don't you just introduce yourself, do your full name?
Yeah, James Paul Peter Knez. That's all
Okay.
my names.
Okay, and when were you born?
July 6th, 1943 in Minneapolis.
That'd be Minnesota.
Yeah, that's right, Minnesota.
Okay. Do you happen to know what hospital you were born at?
Yeah, St. Mary's Hospital. I don't believe it's there anymore. I think I've tried a couple times to find it, and it's non-existent, so it's probably went out of business at some point.
Okay. Who were your parents?
My dad was John Joseph Knez, and my mother was Gertrude Vod, both from Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay. Do you happen to know your mother's middle name?
Florence,
Okay.
Gertrude Florence Knez.
Okay. And do you know where they were born?
They were both born in Omaha.
Oh, you said that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, they were born there and lived there.
Okay. I know you said you were born in Minnesota. In your early life, did you move around at all?
Uh, yes, when I was about 1 year old, my dad was transferred down to Chicago, and we went down there, and we lived in Chicago until I was about, I think, in sixth grade. Fifth grade is when we moved away from there. So I'd have been about 10 years old when we
Okay.
moved to Kansas City,
Okay.
and went through grade school and high school there. And then I went to Colorado State University, um, and graduated from that in '65. And in the time uh, after I graduated, um, went into the Navy, and then my parents moved out to California while I was in the service.
Gotcha. Do you remember the name of your grade school?
It was just Lake Bluff Public Grade School.
Okay. Okay.
And it was a kindergarten through eighth grade, and then high school would have been 9 through 12. But my brother went to the high school, but I didn't.
Okay. Speaking of your brother, we should probably introduce who he is.
Yeah, I have an older brother, about 6 years older, Thomas Richard Knez, and he was old enough that we really didn't have that much interaction between us. I can remember one double date that we had together.
Okay.
But other than that, he was way ahead of me in school, and
Okay.
had his own life and family and all that. But
did-
we got along.
Yeah. Did you happen to ever share a room, or did you?
No, we all had our own room. Maybe when I was first born, or when we moved down to Chicago, maybe we shared a room, but I don't remember ever sharing a room with them.
Gotcha.
Can you tell me a little bit about your house growing up? It sounds like Chicago would probably have been your primary formative years.
Yeah, it was a two-story kind of colonial-looking house, and it was actually in Lake Bluff, 221 Scranton Avenue, and uh, it, it was an unusual house in that it had a stucco exterior, but it had big stones in the stucco. I mean, it wasn't like the stucco today. It had a lot of stones, and my dad would paint it, and then these stones in the winter would fall out. And so he ended up ripping all the stucco off, and with his dad, came down from Omaha, and they totally resided the house in regular redwood siding.
Mhm.
And he did a lot of work on the house, and that's probably where I got the bug of doing things around the house. And you guys have kind of picked up on that also.
Yeah.
So
So you had mentioned your grandfather, your dad's dad. Do you know was he an immigrant?
yeah, three of my four grandparents were immigrants, and so both my dad's parents were immigrants. And I don't want to get too much into this story. It's a long one, but my dad's dad uh, was a child when his father, my great grandfather, moved him up to eastern Ukraine out of Bohemia, which is now Czechoslovakia. And they bought land, they bought a farm. Land was cheap, and sometime after they arrived in the Ukraine, the Russians under Tsar Nicholas decided to cleanse that area of Ukrainians and whoever else was there and resettle it with Russians. And so I never did get the full story, but the ethnic cleansing that they were just killing people. They weren't politely asking them to leave. And so they escaped in the winter. And according to the history of the family, that they were in a one-horse sleigh being pursued, by the Russians on horses, and they managed to outrun the Russians. And they could not go back to Bohemia because their visa that they had wouldn't allow them to come back. Uh, because there was a kind of a depression going on in Bohemia, and they weren't taking back any people that had left. And so they were basically people without country. And so they made their way to Hamburg and got on a stockboat or a cattle boat and came to the US. Uh, my grandmother, my dad's mother, came over from Czechoslovakia with her father and went through Ellis Island. Um, so that's my dad's half. And then my mom's half, her father was born in Denmark and came over when he was a young man. And my grandmother's, uh, my mom's mother, uh, was born in the US in Omaha, and her family originally immigrated to Vermont. And there's a sad story about my great grandmother uh, uh, having lost her husband in a mining accident in Vermont at a slate mine, and then lost all of her children to disease. And for how she immigrated to Omaha, I don't know if she met her husband, Nick's husband, in Vermont, or met him in Omaha. But anyway, so 3 out of the 4 were immigrants.
So because of that, I know our name didn't used to be Nez.
Oh, that is
So
correct.
can you
Yeah,
just give me the brief history on
yeah.
our
They're
on?
both families had kind of different names. Yeah, the original name was spelled Knezacek. Uh, and you can pronounce it any number of ways, but Kenizacek is what I've heard the most. And so my dad was born in 1904, and in 1933, just before, or 32, just before he married my mother in 1933, he cut off the last half of the name so that people in business could supposedly pronounce it better. And people still had problems with KNEZ.
Yeah. I can attest to this day that people are still having problems with
Yeah,
that.
they still have problems. And on my mom's side, I think their name was Swenson. My grandfather on my mom's side was Danish, and His name was Sven Svanson, but somewhere along the way, the whole family changed their name to VAAD, VAD, and uh, and then my grandfather fought in the Spanish-American War, and so he was Sven Vad when he went to fight, and everybody kept calling him Swede, and he got angry at that, so he changed his first name to Frank. So Sven Svanson went to Frank Vad.
Okay.
And anyway, that grandfather, when he came back from the war, started a dairy in Omaha, and it was called City Dairy. And I'll get into kind of the history of that later. It's rather interesting, about his occupation, what happened to the family.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's kind of the family history. You had mentioned your elementary school. What was the name of the high school you went to?
Um, Bishop Miege High School in Mission, Kansas. It was a brand new when I went there, and great school. I think our graduating class was about 250 kids, and now it's much larger than that. It was in at Fairway, Kansas, um, and just a great school.
Okay. So
Yeah.
how did you end up from Chicago then into Kansas?
Yeah. My dad was transferred, basically, and so when I went to a public school in Lake Bluff, and there wasn't a Catholic school around. And then when we got to Kansas City, or Mission, Kansas, actually, I went to 2 years in the local grade school, seventh and eighth, and then uh, sixth and seventh, and then eighth, nine, 10, no, 12, 4 years. I get the old school system and the new school system mixed up. But anyway, then I went to Bishop Miege for 4 years. And then I actually went to 1 year in a Catholic junior college in Kansas City before I went out to Colorado to school.
Nice. And you may have said it before, but who did your father work for that he was transferred?
Yeah, my dad worked for Illinois Bell System, and the Bell System changed owners quite a few times, and I think he ended up retiring with AT&T. But he was a systems engineer. He was one of the pioneer engineers on microwave transmissions, and worked on that pretty much his whole career. In fact, he had during World War II, he had a deferment for the draft just because he was working on microwave transmissions back then. And so, smart man. He was the first person in his family ever to go to college, and uh, he he went initially in Omaha to just a technical school, um, uh, and then because he wanted to go to college, he had to go back to high school and go through a college prep high school, and he went to the University of Nebraska in Lincoln,
Okay.
and that's where he got his start.
But his time, I mean, it wasn't smooth sailing for him as he started at Bell Labs, right? There was, I remember,
Yeah.
a depression.
Yeah, there was during the Depression. He'd been working for them for a few years, and the Depression came along, and they were laying off people. They had to, and my dad had enough seniority to stay employed, but he was a bachelor at that time, and but many of the engineers below him had families, and so he elected to take a pay cut and let the engineers with families stay on. And he went from being an engineer to a janitor of the building that he worked in as an engineer. So, and then actually, I think he finally got his job back in about 1932, right about the time he changed his name. And he married my mom in 1933. And so it all worked out in the end. But I could just regress a little bit on him. When his parents owned a mom and pop grocery store in the Bohemian section of Omaha, which was on 13th Street. And when he was probably 11 or 12, he worked at the telegraph office, and he would deliver messages to and from the telegraphers, and he had roller skates, and he would just roller skate around all these men that were receiving and transmitting messages, and then he would run them up to the front desk or do whatever. And later on, when he was probably about 14 or 15, 16, something in that area, he would deliver groceries in a horse-drawn wagon, to different people. And if he said quite frequently, if he'd go in like the Italian neighborhood, the Italian kids would stop him and unload his wagon of all the groceries and then laugh at him as he put the groceries back in the wagon. So he said that happened going through the different neighborhoods, but he said if anybody did that, he'd get his buddies and go over and beat up an Italian in retribution. So basically, he was in a gang, the Bohemian gang. And it was very polarized.
Yeah.
The neighborhoods were very polarized, which kind of takes me up to marrying my mother. My mother was Scandinavian, and she met my father when he had gone to college, and love at first sight. But it was not smooth going with her family because one, he was not Scandinavian, and two, he was a Catholic, and caused some real problems. And when my parents got married, my mom's dad wouldn't go to the wedding, just because he disapproved so much of it. But later on, my dad became his favorite son-in-law. So yeah, it all worked out in the end.
Okay. So as far as your timeline, we're kind of up to high school so
Yeah,
far, and I wanted to ask about high school a little bit. Like, did you get your license when you were 16?
yes, it did. And I got a 49 Chevy from my brother, who no longer wanted it, and had some mechanical problems. In fact, the reason I think he gave it to me is because he had water in the radiator and it froze. He was gone and it cracked the block. So the first thing I had to do was put in a new engine into the car. But it was a neat car. I still wish I kind of had it. It was a convertible.
You said 49 Chevy, but what kind of what model was it, or do you remember?
No, I don't remember. It was, they all kind of looked the same. It
Okay.
wasn't quite the variety of cars back then. It was two-door. It would be two-door, kind of a coupe if it had had a roof, but otherwise, it had the canvas top.
Okay. Are there any significant girlfriends you want to talk about from high school, or any
No,
good friends you want to talk about from high school?
yeah, I
Or
mean,
just
we kind of dated in a crowd, and uh, took different girls to the prom, the junior and senior prom, but I didn't have a real girlfriend per se. And it was kind of frowned on to go steady in the high school,
Mhm.
and no, so I really, I didn't have a real girlfriend. So, uh,
So what year did you end up graduating high school?
so I graduated in 1961, and then I kind of knew that I wanted to go out to Colorado State, but my dad asked that I go to a junior college 1 year before I went out there because of the out-of-state tuition, which is ridiculously low by today's standards. But uh, so I just went to a kind of a liberal arts junior college, Donnelly College, which was, and it's still around.
Okay.
And probably something you didn't know. I had a friend over there. He was a very political guy, and he said, uh, "Hey, well, why don't you run for the president of the junior class or the first class?" And he says, "I'll be your campaign manager." So I did. I did, and I won because mainly the guy I was running against nobody liked. But I came to find out later on in life, he was the mayor of Kansas City for about 20 years, and, and Jack Reardon was his name, and a great guy. But I think he enjoyed politics even when he was, when you're out of high school,
Yeah.
and so I did that, and it was again just a kind of it wasn't a technical type of junior college, just normal classes.
So you then, from the junior college, you then proceeded out to Colorado State.
Yeah, and it, I'd always had I thought I'd like to be a forest ranger. Why? I knew that, a city kid, but um, uh, somewhere along the way, somebody said something that said, "Hey, I'd like to do that," and so I transferred out there and got my degree in forest management. And about the time I transferred, I got my draft notice, and uh, so kind of the rest was history. And my brother was in the Army at the time, and I told him, I had my draft notice, and he says, "Well, you might want to try something other than uh, the Army."
So before your draft notice, what was your plan? You were going to go into forestry, but what was your ideal?
Oh, well, I had a job up in the Lolo National Forest up in Idaho, and I was very excited about that. And by the way, during one summer, the summer before I graduated, I worked up in Montana for the Forest Service, and different jobs. We fought a few fires, but I was the mop-up crew, which is the lowest rung of the firefighters. And after a fire, we'd crawl around in the ashes feeling for hot embers, and we looked like coal miners every
Okay.
day.
So
But,
I did want to ask you, I want to kind of circle back to you getting drafted. And we don't have a draft in this country today. But will you just describe, what was going on that you were drafted into the
oh,
military?
yeah,
Will you just describe what was going on and
sure.
how that came about?
Yeah. Um, there, Vietnam was just getting going in '65. The French had been defeated in '54, I think it was, and we had this slow-burning CIA type of war going on for years, and then it started really heating up. And so when I was drafted, really there was a lot of fighting going on, and pretty much everybody, that I had a deferment, a college deferment that uh, deferred me until 1965.
Was that so that allowed you to graduate from college?
Yes.
Okay.
But back then it was by the county. Each county had a requirement to supply so many people, and the Johnson County where we lived, they were really hurting for people. So you got 4 years, and that was it. If you hadn't graduated by 4 years, you were going anyway. So The initial thing is my best friend was in the Marine Corps, had gone into the Marine Corps and really, really liked it. And I said, hey, I think I'd like to go in the Marine Corps too. And so I went down to the recruiter's office, and there were all the different services were in this one building. And the Marine Corps recruiter wasn't there. And so I looked over and there was a Navy recruiter, and I just poked my head in there, and he said, well, come on in and talk. And he said, take the test. It's a good primer for taking the Marine Corps test. And so I took the test, and he said, thank you and all that. And I came back the next day, and the Marine recruiter was there, and I said, hey, yeah, I'd like to take the test and join the Marine Corps. He says, hey, that's great. Have you taken any other tests? He says, oh, yeah, I took the Navy test yesterday. And he said, well, I can't touch you until they reject you. Welcome to the U.S. Navy.
Yeah.
And so I went down to Denver for the physical, and they said, you've got really good eyesight. Everything's great. You want to fly? And I said, I don't know. And they said, well, fly you back to Olathe, Kansas for the flight physical. And at that time, my parents lived about 10 miles from the Naval Air Station. So I said, hey, yeah, I'll go back. That's great. I get to see my parents and all that. And so the rest is history. Yep. I took it, wound up in pre-flight. And in a way, it was kind of good. I didn't know too much about flying because the military flying and civilian flying is a lot different from each other.
Yeah.
And I had a roommate that already had his commercial flying licenses, and he had a hard time because I thought, flying with somebody screaming at me from the back seat and throwing his knee pad at me and telling me, don't be such a dummy, hey, this is flying,
Yeah.
And he knew differently, and he washed out actually, even though he had lots of hours. And so the needs of the service is something that, you may want to go and do something, but, if there's no slot available or they need you somewhere else. And so I wound up, they said, after I got my wings, they said, we need more flight instructors because the air war is really heating up and we need to train more pilots. So for a year, I was a flight instructor in T-28s at the Whiting Field.
Gotcha.
And during that time, I got to talk to a lot of pilots that were coming back from Vietnam and all that. And one of them took me aside. I was getting to my rotation date where I had put in where I wanted to go. And he said, flying over there is not what you think it is. He said, if you are given an honorable option to do something else, take it. But if you go to Vietnam, you go to Vietnam. And so I heard about this squadron they were just forming. It was a communication squadron that communicated with the ballistic nuclear submarines. And they were just getting the planes delivered. And so I put in, I want to go to this squadron. And that squadron was going to the Cold War. This was all stuff about our nuke subs and Russia and the Cold War, and instead of the hot war in Vietnam. And so I got my billet, and I went to the Air Force for training because the Navy had just very few 130s. So I did my C-130 training down in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, at the Seward Air Force Base. And then the rest of the time, I got out, I was in VQ4 at Patuxent River. And it was a great squadron. We'd fly 10-hour missions, flew all over the Mediterranean, all over the Atlantic, flew into well, Norway and to England, down to Italy and Spain, uh, you know, the Azores. So it was turned out to be quite quite good for getting an airline job. You know, 4-engine crewed aircraft.
All right. So before we get to the airline stuff, which is the next logical progression here, I want to back up just a little bit and ask you what year you graduated college.
I graduated in 1965.
1965. And in your time in Colorado, is that where you learned how to ski?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And it was, yeah, there weren't as many ski resorts back then. Vail had just opened. Like if, see, I got out there in '62. Vail opened in '61, and so Vail had like 3 or 4 runs. They had a small gondola. We'd just drive by past that and go to Aspen, or at least my first place I skied was Eldora. It's a bunch of the smaller ones, but I remember when we did ski Vail, the lift ticket was $5, and you could get a free one if you went up and broke up the snow with your skis. They didn't have snow cats back then, and so we'd sidestep up the hill and break up the the powder.
Yeah.
And so for basically for free, I could go ski there, which I did.
So, yeah.
Let me interrupt for a second. Do you mind if I take this off and cool it down real quick?
Yeah. Let's take a pause.
Okay.
Right here, just because the cameras are having some difficulties. So.
Yeah. I just need to go find like a little bit of water and maybe drink it.
Okay.
All right, 31 minutes in.
I was trying to read and I thought, he did what?
I was anticipating this. You're going to learn all about your husband all over.
I want a copy of this so I can figure out what the hell I've been married to for 50 years. Honestly, it's bizarre to keep my mouth shut.
Okay, I think we're good. So I think we left off at the skiing, you learning how to ski. And so you learned how to ski in Colorado.
Right.
And just a quick side note, I know you had mentioned this one time. You went to college in Colorado before the interstate system was built. Was that correct?
Yeah.
And so for you to go skiing at Vail, that's somewhere as far away from Denver at Vail at the time is like 110 miles
Yeah.
or 150 miles from Fort Collins, where Colorado State is. It was quite an adventure.
Yeah, it was. And I-70 wasn't there. You had to go up over Loveland Pass to get there. So I skied. I didn't ski that much. Like Aspen was a long drive, and if we did that, it was going to be for a couple, 3 days. And so we skied at Eldora, Berthoud Pass, which isn't around anymore. We skied there. I skied at the Loveland ski area. That was operational then. But again, my allowance when I was in college was $5 a week. And for $5, I could, if I had a date, I could go to the student movie, which was 25 cents each, and then go out and get a beer, and that would shoot my $5, with my date. So I wasn't, I really didn't date that much. And
They cut your skiing in half. Huh?
yeah, yeah. If I went on a date, I couldn't go ski.
Mom's not over there. It's fine. She didn't meet you till later. Oh, that's funny. Okay, so did you have any good friends in college, like you wanted to mention, or did you make any like lifelong friends there?
No, Not any that I really kept in touch with. My real the friends that I have today that I consider my best friends all came from the military.
Okay.
And
So before we get too much past the college thing, I wanted to ask you, because I know I had interviewed Uncle Tom,
mhm,
or your brother, and he said you joined him in Europe for a little bit.
yeah,
And when did you do that?
I did that. I think my sophomore year, between sophomore and junior year, and it was they call it a people to people program, where you'd go over and stay with a family for a week. And so I did that. My family was up in Sweden. I stayed with them for a week, and then I spent um, a little bit of time with Tom. Uh, and actually, a friend of mine from school came over, and we got motor scooters, and we toured around Europe a little bit on motor scooters.
So,
And
so what kind of motor scooter did you have?
it was the company was NSU, which went defunct, but it looked just like a Vespa,
Okay.
that type. And we were we were just cruising around on these. I think mine was a 150 or 200 cc scooter, and we were just all on these different highways. And because he was an ROTC, we'd pull into an Army base every once in a while and get some gas and some food, and we camped out some, and it was pretty uh, frugal traveling the way we did it.
Yeah.
And uh, I was in contact with Tom up until a few years ago, Tom Blecka, and he's a good guy to travel with.
Yeah. So uh, once again, I'm going to come back to your family growing up because I know you said you wanted to do forestry, city kid,
Yeah,
but the outdoors had kind of drawn you a little bit. Did your family growing up travel a lot, or were you guys outdoorsy at all? Because I know you
yeah.
did some fishing and some
We
camping
always
growing
went
up.
up. Our standard summer vacation was to go fishing up in Canada for 1 or 2 weeks, and my dad just loved to fish, and we would portage into other smaller lakes that people wouldn't fish in, and he was he was just happy as a clam, fishing. And uh, he would catch as many fish as he could, and then we'd fillet him before we came back and put him in the minnow bucket. So if we got stopped, he wouldn't see how many fish my dad had caught. But yeah, that was my father's thing, was fishing. And so we spent, uh, and there was another couple that had children about our age that we went with. So it was the two couples, went together. And I haven't been back to that resort for, well, I don't think it even exists anymore, but yeah, it was fun.
And what was that couple's name?
The LaFons, and they lived in Minneapolis,
Okay.
and they had met my parents when they were up there.
Okay.
And it was a lifelong friendship that they had with that couple.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Do you have any questions for Dad's earlier life?
Well, I do remember going up to Fort Collins with you and the kids, now your grandchildren, and seeing the dorm where
Yeah.
you were at school. What was it like being in Fort Collins in current times with your grandchildren?
Yeah, it bears no resemblance. Basically the downtown area. There was one area that's kind of goes off in an angle. I don't know the name of the street, but they were kind of dive bars back then, and now they're all high class, bars. And back then it wasn't like that. The school was under 10,000. I think it was somewhere around 7,500, maybe 8,000, 9,000 students, and now it's up around 40,000 students. During the war protests back in the 60s, the original building was called Old Main. You know, it was an administrative building, and they had classrooms, and that was burnt down during the anti-war protests during the 60s. And it was a great school. I really did get a good education there, and it wasn't just about forestry. I had to take all kinds of classes in history and civics and things like that. So I enjoyed it.
Okay. So you had touched on the military. So after college, like you got your draft notice,
Mm-hmm.
you graduated, and then you enlisted in the military, and you went into, obviously became a pilot,
Yeah,
through that thing. So, um, you had mentioned that you became a trainer. You became a trainer right after training.
right, right.
Okay, and then said after you became a trainer, you said what was the next thing you did? You went into that squadron to
Then C-130
the
Squadron. Yeah,
C-130. And so where were you based out of with the C-130
yeah,
squadron?
Patuxent River, Maryland.
Patuxent River, Maryland. I remember you saying you ended up being based out of Germany at some point.
Well, you flew in and out of
Oh, okay.
Frankfurt a lot.
Gotcha.
And yeah, pretty much Torrejon. We flew out of Gardermoen up in Norway. England, we flew out most of the time, and we had to find a place we couldn't be where the transatlantic traffic was, the civilian traffic. We had to be in some place that nobody wanted to fly, because we let out a 5-mile long wire and go into a 30-degree angle of bank, and it would spiral down. And we'd do that for 5 hours. And the submarines knew when we were going to be on station, and so they would let out a reciprocal of that amount of wire as a receiver. And they were a receive only. And so we could feed them targeting information, port calls, anything. If they had a seaman or somebody on the submarine that had a family die or something, we'd pass on that information. And we could take any frequency and retransmit it on VLF, which was the frequency we transmitted to the submarine. And so, like in case of a nuclear war, they shoot off these rockets that have war plans on them called ERGS rockets. And it's VHF frequency, and we could receive this and retransmit it on VLF, because the war plans have plans for all different commands. And so we could do that. It was pretty amazing. It was an amazing operation. And oddly enough, they still do that today. They got away from the 130s for a while and went to a DC-10, and now they're back to the 130s doing it, because it's more efficient aircraft for that mission for loitering. But now it's ultra low frequency. And we had, when I did it, we could only do half the world, and we had a sister squadron in Guam that would do the other half. And now with ultra low, that frequency goes all the way around the world. It can penetrate water for a big distance. They never would tell us how far down
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
frequency would go into the water, but yeah.
From your time in the military, so you got a lot of time on the C-130, but you were also in the trainer. What were the aircraft that you were flying while you were training and in training?
Yeah, in training, you started on a T-34, which was a basic trainer, landing gear up and down. It was a complex airplane. It's the same thing as a Bonanza now. And then we went to a T-28, which was a big radial. And on that, we did more advanced training. Plus, we did our carrier landings in that. And then because I was going to multi-engine, I went to Corpus Christi and flew twin engine prop S2 tracker and did carrier landings with that. And then to the 130, and that was the end of my carrier work when I got out of training.
Did any one of those aircraft seem like it was the perfect one for you, your favorite aircraft?
Yeah, I really liked it. If I had a lot of money, I'd buy a T-28.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it big radial engine in the front, but you know, it burns 50 gallons an hour at cruise, and I don't know what avgas is now, but you know, I couldn't afford to fly something like that now. But yeah, I like the T-28 the best. That was a lot of fun. And I taught cross country navigation, formation, and so on weekends, because I was single, I'd take students on their cross country trips and I'd say, where do you want to go? And a lot of them wanted to go home. And so we'd fly to a military base near where they lived, and they'd get to see their parents or girlfriends or whatever. And it was just a lot of fun.
But you didn't always land at a Navy base. You would land at Army or
Yeah, we'd land, you know, we'd landed Air Force Base. Mainly, it was usually an Air Force base. And when I got on the 130, we preferred Air Force bases because if we needed maintenance, we could get it at an Air Force base. They had all the parts for the 130. The Navy had very few parts, so we'd fly, yeah, Air Force bases in the 130.
Was there any, did you ever have any complications or issues from cross-service rivalry?
No, I mean, it was cut and dry. We were a top secret squadron, and we took precedence over just a normal, say, Air Force flight leaving. And if we had to be on station at a certain time, we got priority to take off at a certain time, and the Air Force would have to wait for us.
I'm sure they love that.
Yeah, yeah. We, I can remember one time there were certain bases they didn't want us to land at, like the air bases that had nuclear commands there. And I remember going into one time going in England, the base we were supposed to land at was you couldn't land. There was no visibility, but we could go into a Air Force base that was nuclear. And we landed, and we were surrounded by Air Force guys with M16s and snarling dogs, and we couldn't get off the airplane because we didn't have clearance to be on the base.
Yeah.
And so when we just stayed on the plane, they refueled us, and when the weather cleared up at our original destination base, and we took off and left.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, kind of interesting.
Do you have any like funnier stories or fun stories from the military? I know you said you had a couple fun weekends in Mexico with some of the officers.
Oh yeah, well we did actually. I went to a couple tailhook reunions in Las Vegas, and that's where all the Navy pilots get together. And they used to hold it in Mexico down in Tijuana, but it got kind of out of hand. And one time the entire Naval Air Force got arrested and thrown into jail in Tijuana, and they had a carrier that needed to deploy, and all their pilots were in jail down in Mexico, and the Navy had to go down and bail out all their pilots. But I missed that. You know, of course, what I went to was very genteel, and
of course,
no,
of course.
Nobody drank too much.
Yeah. So, did you? I know you had met Norm Nelson down there,
Yeah.
and he has remained a lifelong friend.
Yeah.
To this day. And so, can you tell me where you met him, or
Sure.
or how that friendship came about?
After I got my assignment, went through C-130 training with the Air Force, then I had to go to be a qualified navigator to go to this squadron because eventually I'd become an aircraft commander and I had to be able to navigate. And so that's what I did. And Norm and I went to Seward Air Force Base together, and then we went to VQ4 together. And and so we lived together, and he's the person that got me into motorcycles because he loved motorcycles, and he bought a basket case Harley from a sailor and assembled it in our living room. And so
So was that was there a car in between your 48 Chevy that you had in high school, and then I guess we haven't really talked about your vehicles too
yeah,
much, but what
yeah.
was your car after that? Did you have a different one in Colorado,
Um,
or did you have that 48 Chevy through college?
no, the Chevy, I eventually sold it, and then my dad gave me his 54 Olds. And then when I went into the Navy, and I had enough money, I bought a Volvo, 68 Volvo, and I had that through the military and till I just got, let's see, how long did I have that? I probably had that car for 3 or 4 years after I joined Delta, and then I started buying other cars. Yeah.
Okay, so you said Norm got you into motorcycles, but did you own a motorcycle in the Navy as well, or
Yeah, yeah.
so what was your
When we
first
lived, it was
motorcycle?
Honda 305 Superhawk, and it was that was the big displacement motorcycles hadn't come out yet, like the Honda 750, and so the 305 morphed into the 350 and then into the 450, but the 305 was what I had. Norm had a 500cc Triumph, and it was great fun, riding with Norm. He's a very good rider, and I, I, yeah, I wasn't as good a rider as he. And I can remember one time I was following him on a road, and I ran off the road. It was on a curve. It was kind of sandy, and I was heading right for a telephone pole, and so I just bailed off the motorcycle, and the motorcycle missed the telephone pole, but it was tumbling. It's going slow enough where it didn't destroy the motorcycle. And so I went a little slower on the corner. I rode my own ride after that. I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
try and
you
keep up.
learned that lesson. Um, so at what point, I know that there's a story, you had your helmet from the time that you always told us as kids where you were in Mexico on the Baja
Oh
Peninsula
yeah,
and,
yeah,
and wrecked on a
yeah.
motorcycle. And so was that during your Navy days or was that
No,
after?
right after I got out. So that was about in 71. And yeah, I rode down to Hermosillo, which is on the mainland, and then I took a ferry over to the Baja Peninsula, and then I was going to ride down to the very tip. And I was on a curve on a road, paved road, which was unusual for that section of road, but and didn't see it hit some oil that was on the road, and I think some banditos had poured some oil on the road or something. But the first thing I knew something was wrong is when my head hit the pavement, and luckily I had a helmet and a whole riding suit on, and uh, tore the bike up a little bit, but it still started and ran. One handlebar was up here and one was here, and uh, luggage rack was gone.
Yeah.
But I made it into, I think, St. Jean, which is just north of Cabo, and found a guy that repaired motorcycles. He put on a new handlebar. And yeah, there's more to the story, but it's not worth telling. But anyway, I made it home all right. And
Well, I guess that also brings us to the perfect timeline. What year did you say you finished up with the Navy?
in 71, January of 71.
January, and so was that 4 years in the Navy?
5 years.
5 years in the Navy.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did you do with in life after the Navy?
After that, between getting out and flying for Delta, I worked for a Calwood door in Santa Rosa, and I just sold doors, inside salesman
Okay.
selling doors.
And at that point, your folks had moved to California,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, and my dad had retired up to Santa Rosa and built his house up there. So I lived with him for a little bit, and then I had my own place out in Sebastopol. It wasn't too far from where I was working, and while I was there, though, I stayed in the Navy Reserves in a C-118 outfit and kept flying. And Norm, my good friend, got hired. Delta just started hiring about that time. There had been a slow period where they hadn't hired any pilots, and so when he got hired, he called me and he said, "Hey Jim, send in a resume." So I just sent in another resume with updated flight time, and I got a call right away to come in, and I got hired.
And so, and that's it. And
Yeah,
that's how you ended up at Delta.
yeah, yeah. And if I hadn't gotten on with Delta, I would have, tried another uh, airline. And in fact, it kind of worked out, and when you go through training, uh, they say, where do you want to go? And I didn't put down Chicago. They had a small base in Chicago. I'd like to go to Boston, San Francisco, Miami, maybe even Atlanta if I had to. I never even said Chicago, but they saw on my resume that I had lived in Chicago, so that's where they sent me. And the main reason is that the Southern boys, when they go through their first winter up in Chicago, they'd leave as soon as they could, if not sooner. And so I flew out of Chicago where I met Mom.
Yeah.
And I flew out of there until they closed the base in 86 or 85. And then we took a vote whether to move. You guys were involved in that, and I was the only one that raised my hand about moving. And so we lived in Chicago until I retired.
So I'd like to back up just a moment. And Delta Airlines traditionally is a Southern airline.
Yeah.
It had its roots in the South.
Yeah,
You said it was in the Louisiana Delta, correct?
yeah,
And so by the time you had joined, they were a bigger airline.
yeah.
They were a bigger domestic airline. But at that point, were they international?
They might have had, I'm trying to think, they might have had one leg over to London or something like that. But there were only 3,000 pilots. I was like pilot number 3,000 when we were hired. And again, it was mainly domestic. And at that time, the airlines were regulated, like Pan Am and TWA were the main overseas carriers, and everybody else fed them.
Okay.
And it wasn't until deregulation that Delta started buying. They bought Northeast, they bought Northwest, they bought a bunch of different airlines and picked up their routes. And so that's how Delta became such a big international carrier, was just buying airlines that were going defunct or wanted to merge.
Yeah. Go ahead. Oh, so I'd like to track kind of your early days in Delta, or your kind of career, and we'll do it. We'll get back to Delta as you get through your life.
Yeah.
But what was the plane you started out on Delta, and like what was your position there?
Yeah, I was a flight engineer, and it was on a Convair 880. It was a captain, co-pilot, and flight engineer that worked basically the systems, the air conditioning, the pressurization, the fuel, that type of thing. And that went away in about a year. We only had 16 of them. They had B-58 Hustler engines on them, single spool axial flow, and they just had a fire hose feeding fuel into those engines, and they were very fuel inefficient, but they were fast. They were really fast. Mom flew the Convair 990, and their cruise Mach was 9.1, almost to the speed of sound. Our max was 8.8, and what we were supposed to cruise at, and then to save fuel, they eventually slowed it down to 8.4, and the airplanes later on were flying at 7.8 just to conserve fuel, but fuel was a lot cheaper back then. So I did that for a year, and then I started flying co-pilot on a DC-9, and then did that for about a year, and then we had a big economy wasn't doing well, and so they pared back, and I went back to flying engineer on a 727. I did that for a while, and then went back after I left that. Delta had gotten some MD-88s, and I went back to co-pilot on that, and eventually captain on that. And then I went to when I started commuting. I went to Cincinnati, then to Dallas, then to New York. And when I went to New York, I started flying the 767, flew that, and
Were you a co-pilot or
I was a captain.
you're
on
a
that.
captain?
Yeah, it was only international.
Okay. So at what point did you transition from co-pilot to captain?
In Chicago on the DC-9.
On the DC-9, you
On the
transitioned.
DC-9, I transitioned from the 7.2 engineer to the captain on that. 9 was a lot smaller than the 9s they have today. It was the first, but actually that was the first aircraft I ever flew as a jet. The 130 was a turboprop.
Yeah.
But so that was a lot of fun to do that. And then when I finished my career in Atlanta on the 777, and I flew that for about a year.
Okay.
And retired off of that.
When you go back and look at the transition of aircraft from the T-28 you flew as a trainer to the 777 you flew in retirement, I mean, what are some of your observations for how aviation has changed?
Well, technology has made it a lot safer than it was. The glass cockpits are phenomenal. As far as recording, you can see traffic on your screen where the traffic is. You can put routes in. If you have to divert to somewhere, you can just put in where you want to go, and it'll put in the route for you. And it's just really, really an improvement in safety. However, there is a gotcha there in that the pilots can rely too much on technology and not about what's happening. And I think the Airbus is the worst because, like on a Boeing, you could like if you were landing and thought you might go off the runway, you could going into reverse, you could pull all the power you needed in that reverse past what you should, and to get you stopped. Where on an Airbus, it only gives you, what's safe and not the maximum you could have. And the Airbus is more automated than the Boeing aircraft, and you can see that happening on some of the crashes that they've had on the Airbuses. It's just that the people didn't know how to deal with the technology. Technology wouldn't let them do a certain thing, or it was pushing the aircraft over nose down or something, and they didn't know how to correct for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I never flew Airbus. I only flew Douglas and Boeing aircraft. And I think, but overall, the technology is much better than it was years ago.
Do you have any favorites, like memorable stories, things that stand out about your time in the airline? You know, I know Mom has got a story
Yeah.
about it being stopped on a German runway by a tank. But is there anything
Oh,
that would stand out to you as a story you'd like to?
no, any quote problems I had was generally with passengers,
Yeah.
unruly passengers or things like that.
Not even bad, just even good stories or
Yeah, good
memorable moments.
stories. Yeah, I mean, I can remember one time flying over to England, and we were in a fog bank cloud up in the clouds somewhere, and all of a sudden, all the clouds turned green around us. So I said, "What the? Is there some aircraft that's just over us with their right wing? And I'm seeing the green." And we called and it was just vibrant green, and so we called the company and said, "What's going on? What's happening? We're in the clouds and it's all green." And they figured out it was the northern lights, and we are deep enough into the cloud for the green spectrum of green light to get through to us, and that's where the green came from. And uh, yeah, and the international flights going over, they were all night, overnight flights basically, and you'd land at 9 or 10 in the morning. So they were all nighters. Didn't get to see too much. Coming back, they were during the day. And you, depending on the track you were on, you'd fly over the southern tip of Iceland or Greenland, and yeah, it was just pretty routine.
Yeah.
And you had 1,000-foot separation over the ocean, so there were some times when you'd be following another plane that was exactly 1,000 feet above you, and you'd be looking at them for hours.
So, you haven't said how long were you with Delta?
30, a little over 30 years.
30
Not quite
years.
31. Yeah.
Okay. In that time, you obviously flew to most of the locations Delta flew to. Not maybe not all of them, but are there any notable like cities or areas they flew to? Like I know you had mentioned you really like Stockholm.
Yeah, Stockholm was my favorite. Probably the most exotic was flying into Mumbai, into India. That was just kind of culture shock, flying into there. Uh, One of the most bizarre was flying into Moscow. The the Russians, we stayed at a certain place outside their Olympic venue that they'd built hotels for, that we canceled the Olympics when they invaded Afghanistan under Jimmy Carter. And so a couple of our crews got arrested just for walking down the street for no reason. And the city manager to have to come and bail them out of jail so that they could take their flight back to the United States. But yeah, Moscow was is strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems like a common theme about pilots and getting thrown in jail internationally.
And
That's a joke.
yeah, the most unusual one though was during 9/11, and we were in Amsterdam, and we were taking a flight back to Kennedy, and we got to the airport, and they said all the airspace in the U.S. is closed. The Twin Towers have been attacked, and they've fallen down. That's the first we heard of it. And so they took us back to our room and sequestered us into our rooms. We couldn't leave the hotel. And so we spent, I think, 5 days there. And when we went to the airport, we were the first aircraft to leave Schiphol, which is the airport in Amsterdam. And when we showed up, we had no reservations for anybody. And we left with a full aircraft because the terminal was just full of people that had been stranded there. And so we were the first aircraft out of Schiphol back to Kennedy. And it was really something coming in to New York. We could look over and see the plume of smoke coming up from where the towers had fallen.
It was still burning and still smoking when you guys landed in Kennedy?
Yeah, yeah.
So were you you said you were the first to leave from Amsterdam, but were you one of the first international flights to arrive in Kennedy post 9/11?
Not too many before us, probably. You know, probably when they opened it us. They just actually what they did is they dispatched us to Atlanta and not to New York because the New York airspace was closed still, but Atlanta was open. And then New York opened when we were en route, and so they refiled us for New York. So I have a feeling we were maybe within the first 50 aircraft to land at Kennedy coming back.
Yeah, that had to be a pretty incredible time.
Yeah.
Like, you know, to be not, you know, it was an incredible time.
Yeah.
In our country, really changed.
Yeah, it changed everything.
It changed everything in our country, but, you know, to be a pilot at that time, you know, was.
I want to digress a little bit and go back, tell a story that people won't believe, but it's true. When I first started flying, there was no security at O'Hare, and we were flying the DC-9 to Memphis, Shreveport, you know, just the little puddle jumpers. And during duck season, the hunters would come with their shotguns, just walking down the concourse with their shotguns. And they were usually cased, sometimes they weren't, but they'd give them to us. And we had shotgun straps up in the cockpit where we'd strap all their guns in to the cockpit and then give them their guns back when they got off the airplane. And, you know, people don't believe it when I tell them that there was no security. And you could even, Friday night dates, you know, a lot of people would come out, young men would come out with their dates, and it cost you a quarter to go up on top of the terminal and watch the airplanes land and taxi around. And yeah, it was just a different world back then. So I digress, so we'll move on.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to end that section off.
Yeah.
All right, so let's arguably the most important section here. Let's talk about when you met Mom.
Yep.
Should
Mom,
see her look.
Correct me if I get this wrong.
Yeah.
She'll have her own video.
Yeah. Not if, when. Yeah.
When I was in training with Delta, I lived with another pilot. We got an apartment for a few months together, and he was married to a former American airline flight attendant that had been in Mom's class for flight attendant training. And they said, oh, if you go up to Chicago, you know, look up my wife's good friend, you know, Betty Jean. And so when I got up there, up to Chicago, I wrote her a letter or two saying, hey, I'm coming up. I'm friends with Dave and Merle Rumsey, and can you help me find a place? You know, I can't remember that much about the Chicago area. And so when I knocked on the door, and Mom thought I was a newspaper guy collecting for the newspapers. And I said, no, I'm Jim Knez, the guy with the funny last name. And, and so that's how we met.
Okay.
And she was, let's see, she'd been flying since 68. I got up there in 73. So you know, she had 5 years seniority on me already.
Yeah, in the airlines.
She's always senior to me, no matter what I did. And so it just went, from there. We just started dating, and
So how long did you date before
well,
you decided to
I
get
got up
married?
there in, let's see, let me think, probably spring of '73, and we got married in June of '74.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and our it was kind of spur of the moment. We didn't have like a normal wedding. We decided to get married, and we had to get married in between. We didn't have vacation planned for this or anything like that, so we got married, and then we eventually we went on a quick honeymoon up to Montreal. Came back as we were both had to fly, and then our real honeymoon was when we went on a safari over in Africa.
Okay.
And
Can you tell me about the wedding at all, or?
very, very small wedding. It was just immediate family. And
Where was it at?
we got married in a congregational church. And we had, my brother was my best man, and he had a good friend that was a Catholic priest. And so he was one half of the ceremony, and mom's minister was the other half. And so between the two, we had a Catholic congregational wedding,
Okay.
and so it was just immediate family.
Was it in Chicago or was it
Oh
somewhere
yeah, it
else?
was in Elmhurst,
Okay.
and I can't remember. I think the dinner was in Barrington, wasn't it? And I can't remember the name. Oh yeah, the barn at Barrington, the converted barn.
Okay.
There was a very nice restaurant. We did that.
I didn't know that you had gotten married in a barn. I feel like
Yeah, kind of rubs off.
Yeah. Yeah. For context, for those watching the video in the future, Jonathan also got married in a barn in
Yeah.
Rockford, Illinois. So
We weren't born in a barn. We got married in a barn.
Okay, so you said you went up to Montreal for a quick honeymoon,
Yeah.
and then you went, your main honeymoon
Yeah.
was in Africa. So at this time, you both are, like, mom's, just for context of the video, is an American flight attendant, and you're a Delta
Yeah.
pilot. You weren't a captain at this point yet.
No,
You were
no.
still flight engineer,
Yeah,
co-pilot.
probably.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we went over on British Airways, but I can't remember for sure. Yeah, it was British Airways that we flew over, and went to Nairobi. Is where the safari started, and we went into Tanzania. I think we were supposed to go into Uganda too, but they were having a revolution at the time, so they didn't want us to go in there. And saw a lot of neat things in Africa. Saw the Rift Valley, and it's kind of like being in Nevada, where you look out and see nothing.
Yeah. So you're married in '74. I know, as the oldest son, I was born in '78. So
Yeah.
there's 4 years at the beginning of your marriage. Did you guys travel, or where did you live? Did you move around? Like, can you
Yeah,
tell us about the
no,
first part of your marriage?
as soon as we got married, we started looking for a house, and that's when we wound up buying in the house in Rockford,
Okay.
and
could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I've heard some stories, and I'd like to
Yeah.
hear from
Oh,
your
Yeah,
side.
for your side about the purchase of the
yeah,
house on 1302 National Avenue.
no story is ever straight, straight line. And we had gone out. I was in my first year, I think. In my first 6 months of flying, I was getting $600 a month, and I got the outrageous raise of $50 a month from 6 months to a year. So, I wasn't making a whole lot of money, and we knew we couldn't afford the Chicago suburbs or Chicago, but Rockford was a lot more reasonable. And I had phoned with some guys from Rockford, and they said, yeah, it costs a lot less. You can buy a house for a lot less money out there. So we went out, and we were looking at homes. And at the time, I had a dog that my parents were keeping. And so I was thinking in terms of a, a yard for a dog and a ranch house, which I grew up in. And so uh, we looked at a few of those, and we were going through the multiple listings, and Mom saw the house that we eventually bought. And it was a 3-story house, kind of, Victorian. And Mom said, hey, I'd like to see this house. And they said, it's kind of on the wrong side of the river. You really don't want to go over there and take a look at it. Mom said, no, I want to see it. And so we went over and looked at it, and the last updating had been done in 1950 on it, basically, but the house itself hadn't, the physical structure was still the same. Nobody had ruined that. And so we left, and Mom went on a trip, and Mom came down the staircase, from being upstairs, and said, oh, this is wonderful, making an entrance coming down the staircase. And so we left, and so I said, Mom, she really likes this house. And so I bought it while she was on her trip. And so she came home, and I said, I bought the house. And she said, what house? Which house? And I said, the one you really liked. She said, which one was that? And I said, oh, the one with the staircase. And I think she was horrified. But it needed lots and lots of work. But, it was a labor of love when we moved in, and with Mom's decorating expertise, she really turned it into a beautiful house. So that's how we got out there.
And I know as a kid, we were always helping with projects. You did most of them, but there was certainly room to grow in that house. It was 3 stories, but with a basement and an attic, so 5 total levels.
Yeah.
We stayed in shape.
Yeah. Right.
7 bedrooms.
Yeah, 7 bedrooms.
I knew where every creek was going past your bedroom at night.
Yeah. I might add that there were hiding spaces galore for your guys to stash your beer. That you would buy and hide it from us, and and often years later I'd be somewhere crevice crawling around, and there'd be a 6-pack of beer, and oh, that was a good house. Yeah, a good house.
So I guess you spent the first 4 years. You purchased that house fairly quickly after you were married, sounds like. And so I know you said the house was in I wouldn't say money pit, but it needed a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so you seemed like from the stories I've heard, you spent a lot of time, like you redid the kitchen.
Yeah. I mean, it needed, updating. The stove when we moved in was pink, and there was this pink patterned wallpaper, on the driveway wall. And the kitchen was small, but it had a butler's pantry before you got into the dining room. And and this place did have a maid at one time, because there was a back staircase that went up to where the maid lived, and which became your bedroom, Jonathan, initially. And on yours too, you guys both lived in that. But and then we redid the basement, and that was really Mom's idea, and I was initially against it. It was just a dark basement, I didn't see much potential in it, but Mom did, and boy, was I happy we did that. And it turned out to be a great place for you guys to hang out and have your friends over. So
Yeah.
So
you're there 4 years, and then at what point do you realize that you're pregnant with me?
I'm trying to to get this, it would obviously be in '73, and I think when Mom told me, no, that's when she said I have to go to the hospital. I was just banging off the walls, going into different ways. And honestly, I cannot now remember when you told me, this is terrible. It should be one of the moments in
Mom,
my
would you
life.
like to comment? Okay.
Anyway, I found out somehow that Mom was pregnant. And so you were born like it was 20 below. You were born at Rockford Memorial Hospital. And it was just so cold out. And I can remember, driving home, and it was cold. It was probably 20 below coming home. And it's a magical thing that happens to a person, when you're holding your first baby, your second baby in your arms. And I was just blown away. Mom did. She was ready for the job. She knew what she was doing. I certainly didn't. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So I've heard stories that while my delivery was quick, my pregnancy was extended.
Oh, yeah. It
So
was. Mom delivered very quickly. I think maybe an hour and a half. Yeah, hour and a half from the time that her water broke, and it was one long contraction for an hour and a half, I think it was. And we rushed to the hospital, and Mom's dad was with us at the time. And anyway, I was with Mom during that. We had gone to Lamaze classes, and so I was in there trying to comfort Mom, and she was just in extreme pain the whole time. And so it came very quickly. You came out, charging. You were ready to get out of there, and
so I guess did you not travel as much, or did you continue to travel like once I was born, or?
well, we did. We bought our first. We bought a car in Europe. We bought a Mercedes from the factory, and you were in, yeah, 3 months old. Yeah, it was in '78. We bought a '78 Mercedes, and so we took you over to London and into Germany, and that's when we bought the pram in London. I think we went to Germany first and then flew back on London. And then the car we shipped back on Lufthansa I think it cost us $250 to fly our car back, with an airline discount. And the first one came to, I think it was JFK. And then we went up to Maine with you and introduced you to Larry Hendrickson and his wife Julie, who are my good friends from the Navy. And but I can remember you had colic, and sometimes it was hard for you. And we finally were in some little. It was a little bed and breakfast somewhere in Alsace-Lorraine area, and we were in this little hotel, and you were sleeping, and we said, "Oh, great, we can go down and have a nice meal together." And as soon as we started to go down, you woke up and started crying, because of your colic. And so that night, again, we took turns eating. and but it was overall a good trip. You were a real trooper during that. And I think after we turned the car in, we flew to London and bought the pram, or did we buy the pram at a later time? Earlier time, okay. We bought the pram at an earlier time, and yeah, so that's pretty much it. You did a lot of traveling when you were both you kids did a lot of traveling when you were young. We take you places.
Okay. I know there was a ski trip. You guys had skied in New Zealand, and
Mm-hmm.
I think did you teach mom how to ski, or did she know how to ski before you
I, you know,
started
I,
dating?
I think I got mom into skiing,
Okay.
and yeah, the New Zealand trip, we had skied already, so mom knew how to ski when we went there. And New Zealand, we went in the summer, which was winter down there, and we went up on the Tasman Glacier and skied the Tasman part of the glacier first, and then they flew us back, and then we did the McPherson Glacier, which was the other side of the Tasman Glacier. And that's where we were supposed to meet up with the aircraft was going to fly into this one place, and he didn't show up, and the sun was getting lower and lower and lower. And we had a guide, and he said, we better start hiking up to this little mountain hut because we may have to spend the night. It gets really cold here at night. And so we were uh, hiking up the hill when we heard the airplane, and he landed down below us where he should have. So we skied down and got on, and he said, "Oh yeah," he said, "I was in the bar having a drink and realized that I was supposed to pick you guys up." So I got in a plane and
Yeah, finish the drink
and
real quick.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
this wasn't, O'Hare runway. They took off. It was he took off and bended around, and uh, so that was one of our more memorable ski trips that we've ever been on.
So, so now I'm born in '78. Jonathan was born in '81.
Yeah.
So, can you tell me about when you figured out? Do you remember how or where you were when you found out you're
No,
pregnant with
I
Jonathan? No.
cannot. Mom is going to have to remind me. Um, I do know that I was very, very happy uh, for you to have a brother or a sister. It didn't matter. We'd be happy with either. Um, I remember after you were born, we went out to see my parents out in Santa Rosa, and you were still a babe in arms. And I'd never seen my dad cry before, but when we put you in his arms, he just started bawling. So, and I'm sure he was equally as emotional, and but by the time you came along, he had been having strokes, and he was. That happens, I think, when you have a stroke, you become more emotional about things. So,
So,
anyway, he was happy to see you.
so this also brings up your father and kind of a short timeline. I'm born, Jonathan's born, and then what year did your father pass?
My dad passed in '85, March
80.
of '85. So, and he, like my mother, had subsequent strokes from each other, and each time they were less aware of things. The dementia was setting in. So towards the end, he didn't know anybody.
Yeah. Okay. How did your mother take your father dying? I mean, they had a quite a long marriage.
Yeah,
Uh,
they were married 33. They were married in 1933, so 53 was their 50th was in '83. 2 years before stroke, and you probably don't even remember being at their 50th wedding anniversary, but they got remarried, on their 50th wedding anniversary, and Dad still was enough together to realize, the significance that they were married 53. So they were basically married for 52 years, and yeah, they were. Um, uh, and I think you'll find this out yourselves. And my dad, did what he could, raising me, and the older I've become, the more I realized what a great father he was. He used to piss me off, pardon the language, but when I was growing up, and but he did the best he could.
Yeah.
And uh, he let go when he had to let go, and let me make my own mistakes, or so yeah, I had great parents.
So your father, passes away in '85.
Yeah,
Uh, and your mother stays in Santa Rosa in the house that they built
yeah,
for a number of years.
yeah. She died in late '94. It's almost 10 years.
10 years. But in that time,
Yeah.
I know your brother had taken over some of the duties of helping take care of her,
Yeah, yeah,
correct? And then, but I know she did move into a nursing home. Do you know what year they did that in?
yeah.
Or we did, or was that our was, sorry, let me rephrase this. Was that our doing, our family's doing?
No, she had started getting frail maybe 5 years after living alone in the house, and I can't exactly remember the year that she had her big stroke. She had moved. What happened is that she had a pretty good stroke, and then recovered from it, and she went into uh, assisted living in Oakmont. There was a facility there that she went initially, and then she had another stroke or two, and that's when we decided, and my brother agreed, that she could come back to Rockford and be in Wesley Willows, which was more comprehensive care. And so we got Mom back to Rockford, and where she went into Wesley Willows, and then we went out and fixed her house up and sold it.
Yeah.
And so that I'm trying to think of the exact year. She was probably in Wesley Willows for maybe 3 years before she passed away. So and anyway, and that's how Mom wound up back in Rockford, and yeah, for a few years, she would recover from these mini strokes, and she'd have Christmas with us, and and then she was one of the reasons we moved her back is because Mom could watch her a lot better. Tom lived 80 miles away down in Mill Valley, and none of the kids lived in Santa Rosa or anything, and so it was tough for him to get up there all the time. Where in Rockford, we could get over to see her in a 15-minute drive. We could be over to see her and take care of her. So it worked out just really well.
So I would like to just get the story from your perspective of moving grandma out from California to Rockford, because that actually turned into an interesting, from my memory, an interesting thing where not only was the house, how many years they had lived in that house that they built themselves.
Yeah.
It took a lot to clear out that house.
Yeah. No, I have. My dad was kind of a pack rat. He kept things, and they had a big attic, so he could keep a lot of things. And So I'm kind of like that myself. I don't. I keep things around. Anyway, yeah, and it was just it was in a way kind of good and bad news going up and finding all these old things that had no value, and they had sentimental value but no real value, and so we filled up, I think, two big dumpsters full of stuff from their house, and updated the insides. The aqua was really big when they built the house, and they had aqua toilets and aqua this, aqua that. So, and I don't know that we replaced all the plumbing, but certainly painted the walls to a more neutral color. Yeah. And it was a good house. They had a big lot. It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, and I'd just like to very quickly mention the fireworks we found
Oh, yes.
stashed all throughout the
Yeah.
house. It's just,
Well, yeah. Uh, my dad used to fight the gopher. He had a big gopher problem, and so he bought these M80 firecrackers and would throw them down the gopher holes and blast the gophers out of there. And uh, I don't know if I sent you guys out or if I was the one that threw the M80 down the gopher hole. And we said, yeah, let's just get rid of these. What fun. We'll have fun getting rid of all these M80s. And so the thing went off, and the flaming debris shot out the gopher hole right into some dry grass and started it on fire. And the hose didn't reach. I went and got the fire extinguisher. It was out of carbon dioxide, to shoot it, and it spread to the neighbor's yard. And a big debris pile of tree limbs and things like that. It went up like whew. And the fire department came and luckily put it out, before it spread into the Mount Hood. There's a state park there. It would have been horrible. It was during the summertime. And consequently, I got a citation for child endangerment from from the police, and so I eventually went to a lawyer, and he argued on my behalf and got the charges uh, taken away, because if I like landed in San Francisco and blew a tire, yeah, if they would check my police record and find out I was, had a warrant out for my arrest. So
yeah.
anyway, it cost us a pretty good sum of money at that time to get the charges cleared.
So I guess at this point we're in the 90s.
Yeah,
Um, you know, what you're fairly far along into your career at this point, right?
yeah, yeah.
Like, so what year did you retire from the airlines?
2003. Yeah,
Okay.
and uh, yeah, it was. I almost flew for 31 total years. I'm in my 30th year or 31st year, but really 30 years of flying. And yeah, you guys went with me on my last flight to Frankfurt,
Yeah.
and that was a lot of fun.
And you ended off flying as a 777 captain.
777 when I retired. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was Frankfurt, and we stayed in Mainz, if I do
Yeah,
believe
mine's
so.
at the Hilton that was right on the Rhine River. Yeah, and just had a great time. Good crew. Had the retirement dinner at a restaurant called Rosie's,
Yeah.
and just delightful.
So looking back on your career in the airline, is there anything you miss? Is there anything you still remember that was kind of a pain in the ass?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's good news and bad news for everything you do, for every career, and I love the flying, but what I didn't like was being gone so much, and I miss a lot of your growing up and things that you participated in. Miss Christmases um, and those memories are more dear to me now than flying. So in a way, I wish I'd been around more for your when you were growing up than I was.
Can
But
you, can you tell me a little bit about just the normal day to day though? Because I know we didn't have a typical 9 to 5 job with typical parent schedules. Tell me
yeah,
how things worked day in and day out.
yeah. Well, that gave us the ability to travel more. You probably traveled more than your friends did. Uh, um, we probably had, oh, yeah, more of an exotic life, rather compared to a 9 to 5 type situation. But yeah, I mean, we took advantage of the airlines and we flew a lot and went to different places. And I think you guys saw quite a bit.
I personally remember going to France, England, Germany. I think we went to Venezuela maybe one
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
I mean, we went, yeah, Spain. We traveled all over the place.
yeah,
Always standby, always dressed up in a
Yeah.
suit in case we
yeah,
were going to get in first class.
Yeah.
yeah. I remember one time, Jonathan, with you, we went to let me see, Greece,
Yeah.
and we we were there when Clinton was coming, and they had all these riots going on because we weren't that popular at that time. Americans weren't that popular with the people in Greece because we had backed the wrong person in the coup or something like that. So we were basically sequestered to the hotel for the first day, and then the second day, when the riots kind of went down, then we went ahead and went over to that island that had no vehicles.
Mhm.
It was just foot traffic or donkeys,
Mhm.
things like that. And yeah, I can remember time going with you to Panama, uh, Michael, and we had a nice long layover, and we went out to some exotic beach and had a good time. So it was really nice that there were trips that you guys took that time. We went to France, to Lyon. You went with us there, and then you went on your own after Mom and I left. Uh, you went to Germany, I think, and um, the time you went to Switzerland uh,
Yeah.
for the rave.
Yeah. We didn't go there for the rave.
It
We
just
happened to be there.
You
You dropped us off.
and went
and we,
back, and there you were.
yeah, we
Yeah.
were.
So anyway, yeah, that was the good part of it.
I do remember fondly being in Germany, and they had, maybe it was Munich or Frankfurt, but they had their Christmas festival, and we had gotten some food, just off the square where they had all the markets going. Anyways, it was very pretty. I
Yeah.
very much appreciate that. But what about day to day at home? I mean, there was a while there where you were home for 3 or 4 days and Mom was gone, and then Mom would be home
Yeah.
for 3 or 4 days and you were gone.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, yeah, that actually that worked out pretty well. And sometimes when we were both gone, we had a babysitter, the Kashis. Mrs. Kashi would take care of you guys while we were both out of town, and that worked out quite well for years. Yeah. And then one day she says, "I can't do this anymore," and so we found a neighbor that didn't work out that well, that would take care of you, and they were just a couple houses away. And by that time, I think we were able to have somebody home all the time, and uh, you had what I would consider very a normal uh, upbringing. You did your normal things that teenagers normally do, that I did, that Mom did, and no, and Yeah, we won't go into that.
Yeah.
But,
I would like to bring it up to a previous subject we had, but it seems that when you had kids, you didn't have any motorcycles.
correct. Yeah. Um, yeah, I still had the motorcycle gene in me, but I didn't buy a motorcycle until maybe a year before I retired, or maybe it was a year after. I can't exactly remember. Anyway, yeah, when you guys were basically gone on your own, and then so I bought that Honda Nighthawk.
Well, let's just go ahead and get the whole the list out there. So you had your Honda Superhawk much earlier on, and then you sold. Okay, so take us from there
Well,
forward.
yeah, we'll start out with the motor scooter I had over in Europe, and when I visited my brother. Then the Honda Superhawk, and that was a 305. And then uh, towards the end of the Navy, I bought a Triumph 650 over in England and brought it back on the 130 on the airplane I was flying. And then then I sold it. I sold it after I got to California. And I didn't have another motorcycle until probably a year before I retired.
And then you got the Nighthawk, the black Nighthawk.
Yeah, then I got the Nighthawk, and then I bought the KLR, and then I bought the 1000 V-Strom, and then I bought the 650 V-Strom. So at one time I had 4 motorcycles, 2 in Judy's garage and 2 out here. And then I started selling off. So now I just have the 2 V-Stroms.
And I know that you got your Nighthawk, and you'd had it for all of several hours before you and I went for a ride on the Nighthawk. And I thought, yeah, motorcycles are pretty cool. I'm going to get one.
Yeah, yeah.
So you had a riding buddy pretty much right away.
Yeah. You know what? So I had the Nighthawk when you were still at Rose. Yeah, so I had to have bought it in maybe 99 or something like that for you to ride it, because then you still bought your 650 when you were still at Rose.
Mm-hmm.
And then you went on, and your stable of motorcycles just appeared after that. So
well, and it's nice to have seen motorcycling turn into a family affair, because Michael eventually also owning the Nighthawk himself. We all own the Nighthawk.
Yeah, we all owned it. And then
and now the kids having motorcycles.
Yeah.
What's that like, seeing the kids on their dirt bikes?
Oh, how fun. Yeah. Yeah, they have more adventure in them than I do now.
Yeah.
But it's so fun. Like that time we were up in Wyoming, we stayed at Kurt Gowdy Park, and then went next door to that state, the state park, and we're riding up there. And that was fun to see the kids. Yeah.
Yeah, so there have been plenty of adventures.
Yeah.
The 3 of us and just the 2 of us have gone on. But I want to go back on the timeline a little bit. Now that we've gotten the full list of motorcycles, this will transition us back into you're in Rockford now. It's the 2000s, and you've retired.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like at the end of your retirement, or right before you were retired, you started looking for a second house, like a vacation house.
Yeah.
It seems to me that specifically you wanted a ski house.
Mm-hmm.
And so where were you looking, or what was that process like, and how did that go with Mom?
Well, we knew it was going to be Salt Lake or somewhere in Colorado. And, we enjoyed skiing out in Salt Lake. It was easy from the airport to get up there and go ski. And Delta had a hub there. And but we came out for a wedding out that was in Vail. And while we were out here, that was in '02. And we were out here, and we had been looking kind of off and on all the time. Every place we went, we'd kind of look at properties. And so we were out here for the wedding, and we got a realtor, and we found this house. And we looked at other houses and decided not to get them, but we saw this house and we put a bid on it, and got accepted. And so we bought it in '02. And so we had it for about a year, and we really didn't come out that much to it because I was still working a full schedule, and Mom was working a full schedule. And it wasn't until after I retired really that we came out here more, but not as much as we had liked. And when Mom retired in 2008, that's when we started coming out here a lot, and then decided, since you guys had moved to Denver, to make it our full-time residence. So,
Gotcha. So at this point, you had gotten yourself acquainted enough, and the house, we should say, is in Edwards, Colorado,
yeah,
in the Single Tree Housing Development, which is about a 10-minute drive from the Arrowhead Lift at Beaver Creek.
yeah, yeah,
And so at this point, how many you had decided to volunteer
yeah.
for Beaver Creek?
Yeah, I did. I was a mountain host, which is you ski. Yeah, you give people directions in the morning on how to get to places, and then you ski around during the day and help people find if they're lost, or if you see an accident, you call ski patrol. And I did it for 15 years. Mom did it later on, but through that volunteering on Mondays that we did, we met all the really good friends that we have up in the valley. We also volunteered at the Villars Performing Arts Center. We were ushers, volunteer ushers for that. Uh, I have since started being an election judge in Eagle County. That's the most fun I've had doing anything. That's most rewarding. I work in the counting room and sometimes in uh, other positions, like receiving the votes, the ballots that come in on the mail. But to me now, that's my favorite thing to do. If you're going to do something extracurricular, is just being an election judge.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun. I worked on trails for years. Um, One of the nice thing about Singletree is they have good hiking trails around it, and that's a number one thing people like when they take a survey of the people that live in Singletree. What do you like most about Singletree? And it's the hiking trails. And so, yeah, I took over uh, being the head volunteer for that and getting people to come up and work on the trails. We try and do it 3 or 4 times a summer. We also got all the barbed wire down from around it, and that took a bunch of years to do. But so now I don't do it I'm not the honcho. I'm the El Jefe. I'm just a worker. When they have a work day, I'll go out and help them.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So you got the house, you said you got the house in Edwards in '03 or '02.
Oh yeah, '02. Yeah.
'02. And then I subsequently moved to Denver in '03. And then Jonathan, you moved in 13?
Yeah, 2013.
Yeah.
In 2013. So we're all out there. I eventually get my motorcycle license in 2015. And that led to some, and at this point you had moved 2 of your motorcycles out to Colorado, correct?
Yeah. Well, I think so. I'm trying to think when I bought the. Yeah, I might have bought 3 out.
You certainly.
Yeah, by 2015, I had 4 motorcycles. Yeah, 2 in Jonathan's garage and 2 out here.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know that had led to us having some pretty fun motorcycle
Oh, yeah.
adventures. Up and rode into Wyoming as the 3 of us. And then we had a crazy ride to the Grand Canyon where it snowed for 4 of the 5 days we were on the bikes.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, going over. I just want this on record, and it is on video. We went over $1 Million Highway in sub-freezing conditions in a snowstorm. Just
Yes, we did. And I was talking to myself probably a lot, and we had these the communicators,
Yeah.
and you'd say, "What?" And I say, "What temperature is it?" And you'd say, "Oh, it's 34 degrees
Yeah,
out,
just
lying through
yeah.
your teeth." And I said, "Oh, okay," but we're in a blizzard,
So
and
you and Jonathan also had quite a significant motorcycle ride. You guys did the
Continental
the
Divide.
yeah,
Continental
Continental
Divide.
Divide.
Can you
Yeah,
just speak on that a little bit?
yeah, we took the V-Strom 1000, and Jonathan rode the KLR 650, and we were going to do the south part first because we did it in early spring, and I think we're 1 or 2 days into it, and Mom had gotten pneumonia, and so we came back. And after one day, and we stayed a few days with Mom, and then we got a big oxygen tank and threw it in the car and loaded up the motorcycles and our dog Andy, and we drove up to the Canadian border, offloaded the motorcycles, and during the day we'd be off on the dirt roads following the Continental Divide, and Mom would be killing time and then meet us where we were going to meet that night. And so we did the whole trip back down to Colorado. And that was about 7 days, I think, 7 or 8 days.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, good. By that time, Andy was kind of old, and so Mom was having to kind of lift him in the car. Uh, and it was a struggle.
Yeah.
But we had, it was just such a good time. It was, remember one time in the middle of, I don't know if it was middle of Idaho or middle of Montana. It was probably Montana that we're sitting there in our rustic motel, sitting on the thing, and there comes a Good Humor man by, and there's probably not 50 people in the whole county, and Good Humor man goes by in his truck. So, just funny things like that happen.
That was my first introduction to doing any off-road riding.
Yeah.
And, especially being on a trail where you're riding next to snow seemed kind of
Yeah,
surreal
yeah,
at the time. But since then, I've gone on to do more off-road riding, and I certainly credit that trip with showing me that I could do it, even if we're very far away from home, and
yeah,
things will turn out.
yeah,
So let's talk about the decision. You were going to go down to one house,
yeah,
and the decision to move full time from Rockford to Colorado.
yeah,
And I know you had briefly mentioned that it was because both your children are out in Colorado, and
yeah.
Jonathan now has grandchildren.
yeah.
Um, but was it hard, like leaving Rockford? Because I know you had been in Rockford.
Yeah.
How many years did you own the house?
I think, well, we left in 15. So, we bought out there in 03. So, it was a long time.
Or you bought the house in Rockford in
Oh,
'74?
I'm sorry, in 74. So that's
41 years?
Yeah, 41 years. And, it was good and bad leaving. We were ready to leave Rockford. We were ready to be in Colorado with you guys. But we had really good friends back in Rockford. It was just kind of hard to say goodbye.
Yeah.
But overall, the plus was for us to move and not stay in Rockford.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so, who are some of the notable families? Who are some of the notable friends?
Yeah, the Hugheses, I think, were really dear friends. And then the Holmans, Swifts, the Munsons, they were just all dear friends.
Yeah.
But I really think if you had to pick somebody that was our best friend in Rockford, it would be the Hugheses. Yeah.
Gotcha. And I know we didn't really touch on all the people on National Avenue where the house was, but I know that there was a lot of very close.
Oh, yeah. And that's true. Our neighbors on either side of us, the Tabors on one side and the Smiths on the other, I would kill to have those type of neighbors again. They, the families kind of meld into one, and they're just terrific, terrific neighbors. Uh, oh yeah, and the Welguses that live down the street. Yeah, you're fortunate where on the street, uh, there were lots of people that were your age, and you could go out and play in the street, and which you did. And yeah, with the Joe McDonough, and the Welguses, yeah, that was a good group.
Gotcha.
Well, let me ask. So, out of you've had a long life with a variety of experience, lived in many different areas, traveled and seen many different countries. What are your takeaways? Are there any particular key lessons you've learned in life that you want to share with future generations?
Yeah, I mean, yes. In your life, you're going to meet some people that will give you insights. And you won't know when these insights are going to come. And I can remember one man, like my father was probably the person that gave me the most direction in life. But I remember when I was in flight training, I had an instructor that I did not like at all. He'd just come back from Vietnam, and we'd go up on a lesson. He was yelling at me and throwing his knee board at me, and he was introducing stress into flying, so that if ever I did fly in combat, yeah, I would know what stress was. And I was having trouble with a particular pattern that you had three variables all changing at the same time. And I think I've mentioned this before, but I was just having trouble meeting the requirements. You had to fly at a certain rate and turn at a certain rate, and your airspeed was always changing. And I told him, he was yelling at me, and I said, I'm just having trouble, getting doing three things at one time. And he said, you are the commander of this aircraft, and if it's not where you want it to be, how come? And that was like a light going on. And so I got a really good life lesson from a guy I didn't like very much, but but that served me extremely well, in life. And the other thing, I don't want to get too nostalgic, but I think that the older I've gotten, the more I appreciate things. And I'm trying to think of the word. Um, uh, when people do things for you, to realize that they're really helping you out. And there's people that do things for you every day that you don't think about. Uh, a driver that lets you in, when you're on your motorcycle, or that mechanic that fixes your car or motorcycle. And because of that, it works, and you're doing, gratitude is the word I'm trying to think. And I, I think the older I get, the more I appreciate what people do. Um, and not take things for so much granted. That okay, he's a mechanic, he's going to fix a car. Well, he could fix it good, or he could fix it bad.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the thing that I appreciate more the older I get is just gratitude. And as it, they say the Lord gives you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should listen more than you talk. And I think that pretty much is all I have to say.
I think that's a great way to end it.